Who do you trust? I mean, really trust? I bet the list is short, very short. The writer of the letter to the Hebrews knew this. He knew that underneath the issues facing the members of his congregation was the issue of trust. He perceptively realized that it boiled down to whether they had enough trust in God to maintain their faith when times got tough. It's a question that still confronts every believer today. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Thursday, January 18th, 2024. In today's epistle reading from the daily lectionary, the writer of Hebrews urges his flock to place their trust in God, just as Abraham had done so long before. He begins, "When God made a promise to Abraham, because he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, 'I will surely bless you and multiply you.' And thus Abraham, having patiently endured, obtained the promise." So there's a funny scene in the movie Oh God, starring John Denver and George Burns, in which God, played by Burns, takes the stand in a trial in which Denver's character, a grocery store manager named Jerry Landers, whom God has called to be a modern-day prophet, tries to prove in a court of law that God actually exists and has given him a message to deliver. When God finally appears on the scene after some uncomfortable minutes, he takes the stand. The bailiff then swears him in with the usual question, "Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" To which God replies, "So help me." In effect, that's what God did in making a promise with Abraham. He swore by himself. In the ancient world, before there were fancy contracts that people would sign, they routinely swore oaths in the name of a god to demonstrate the truth of their word. In effect, they were calling upon the god or gods as witnesses against the oath maker that if he were telling a lie, he would suffer the consequences of God's wrath. But what if it is God who is making the promise? There is no higher power to swear by. So in making a promise to Abraham, God swears by his own name. The writer continues, human beings, of course, swear by someone greater than themselves, and an oath given as a confirmation puts an end to all dispute. In the same way, when God desired to show even more clearly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it by an oath, so that through two unchangeable things, in which it is impossible that God would prove false, we who have taken refuge might be strongly encouraged to seize the hope set before us. We have this hope, a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters the inner shrine behind the curtain where Jesus, a forerunner on our behalf, has entered, having become a high priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. When the writer refers to two unchangeable things here, he means God's promise and God's oath attesting to that promise. In neither case does God go back on God's promises and oaths. And if that's the case, he urges his believers to trust God's promise and God's oath. And in trusting God's promise and oath, they may therefore have complete and certain hope, knowing that God will be faithful to his promise. If Abraham gained hope because of God's promise and oath, we now have a promise made by the one who has come down from heaven, experienced all the suffering we experience, and has returned to the heavenly throne, the inner shrine, behind the curtain in the Holy of Holies, where God reigns supreme. And once again, the writer invokes the name Melchizedek, the great high priest. Who is this Melchizedek? He's mentioned him now 3 times, but without explaining who he is or why Jesus is a priest according to the order of Melchizedek. In tomorrow's reading, he'll finally explain the significance he attaches to this obscure and enigmatic figure. Today, it is enough to contemplate what it means to trust in God's promises. Can God be trusted? If so, why do we doubt? And if not, why do we bother with this whole faith thing? This is the very point Paul makes in 1 Corinthians 15 when he says, "If for this life only we have hoped in Christ, we are of all people most to be pitied." But God can indeed be entrusted. In fact, we stake our very lives on it every day. Tomorrow, who is this Melchizedek, and why does the writer of Hebrews mention him more times than in all the rest of the Bible combined? But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.